The gunshot that killed Emma's husband still echoed in her memory as she crouched in the darkness of the root cellar. Her 3-day-old son pressed against her chest. She could hear footsteps above, heavy boots crossing the floorboards of the abandoned homestead she had sought refuge in 2 days ago, praying that whoever found her would show mercy rather than finish what those outlaws had started on the trail from Denver. Preston Nash descended the wooden stairs into the cool darkness of the root cellar, lantern held high, expecting to find stored vegetables or perhaps some forgotten supplies left by the previous owner. What he found instead made him freeze mid-step. A young woman with tangled auburn hair and frightened green eyes stared up at him from the corner, clutching a bundle of blankets that squirmed and made soft mewing sounds. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and desperate, "please do not hurt us." Preston slowly lowered the lantern and raised his free hand in a gesture of peace. "Madam, I mean you no harm. I just bought this property 3 days ago in Black Hawk, Colorado. I had no idea anyone was here." Emma Jenkins studied the man before her. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair and kind brown eyes that showed genuine surprise rather than malice. His clothes were dusty from travel, and he carried himself with a careful strength that spoke of hard work rather than violence. "You bought this place?" Her voice cracked with relief and exhaustion. "Yes, madam. Signed the papers with the land office on Tuesday. I am Preston Nash, late of Missouri. I have been working cattle drives for 6 years, saving every penny to buy my own land." He took another careful step down. "May I ask what brings you to my root cellar with what appears to be a very young baby?" The infant chose that moment to begin crying, a thin wail that made Emma wince. She tried to soothe him, but her movements were weak and uncoordinated. Preston noticed her hands trembling. "When did you last eat, madam?" Emma looked down at her son, then back at Preston. Something in his face, perhaps the genuine concern in his eyes, made her defenses crumble. 2 days ago, maybe 3. I lost track." Preston set the lantern down carefully and backed toward the stairs. "I am going to get you some food and water. I will be right back. I give you my word I mean you no harm." He disappeared up the stairs, moving quickly. Emma could hear him rummaging through what must be his travel supplies. True to his word, he returned within minutes carrying a canteen, some dried beef, hardtack, and half a loaf of bread that looked relatively fresh. "It is not much, but it will help." He set the items on an overturned crate near her. "I will go back upstairs and give you some privacy." "But madam, that baby sounds hungry and you need proper food to feed him. When you are ready, please come up. I promise on my honor I will not harm either of you." Before she could respond, he climbed the stairs and shut the door, leaving her the lantern. Emma stared at the food, then at the closed door. She had no choice but to trust him. She was too weak to run, too exhausted to fight, and her son needed her to survive. She ate slowly, forcing herself not to gulp down the food despite her desperate hunger. The water was cool and sweet, better than anything she had tasted in days. As she ate, she felt strength returning to her limbs, and her milk came in stronger. She nursed her son, who settled into peaceful sleep against her breast. After nearly an hour, Emma gathered her courage and her baby and climbed the stairs. The main room of the homestead was small but sturdy, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and windows that let in the late afternoon Colorado sunshine. Preston sat at the table, carefully not looking toward the cellar door, giving her the choice to approach. "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned then, and she saw he had been preparing more food. A pot hung over the fire, and the smell of beans and salt pork made her stomach growl despite what she had already eaten. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs. You look like you have been through considerable hardship." Emma sank into the chair gratefully, adjusting her son in her arms. Now in better light, Preston could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably only 20 or 21, with delicate features marked by exhaustion and grief. "My name is Emma Jenkins," she began, her voice steadier now. "I was traveling with my husband Thomas from our small ranch outside Denver. We were heading west to meet his brother in California. Thomas thought we could start fresh there, build something bigger." She paused, her eyes distant. 3 weeks ago, we were camped along the trail. Thomas had gone to water the horses at a creek. I heard shouting, then gunshots. 4 men rode into our camp. They killed Thomas before he could even draw his weapon. Preston's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her tell her story. "I was 5 months along then, though I had not told Thomas yet. I wanted to be sure before I gave him the news. The men took our horses, our supplies, everything of value. They argued about what to do with me. One of them, the leader with a scar across his face, said they should just leave me there. Said a woman alone would not survive anyway. They rode off laughing." "How did you make it to Black Hawk?" Preston asked gently. "I walked. I buried Thomas as best I could with rocks from the creek bed and started walking. I followed the trail markers, hiding when I saw other travelers because I did not know who to trust. I found berries and drank from streams. About 2 weeks ago, I realized the baby was coming early. The stress, the walking, the lack of food. I found this homestead 3 days ago. It looked abandoned and I thought I could hide here, have my baby in safety. I delivered him myself in that root cellar." Preston rose and ladled beans into a bowl, setting it before her. "That is the bravest thing I have ever heard, Mrs. Jenkins. Just Emma, please. I feel like I am not entitled to be called Mrs. anymore with Thomas gone. You are a widow, Emma, not an unmarried woman. There is no shame in that title." Preston sat across from her, his own food untouched. "You and your son are safe here now. I give you my word on that. Why would you help us? You do not know me. Because it is the right thing to do, and because no woman who just gave birth alone in a root cellar deserves to be turned out." He paused. "What is your son's name?" Emma looked down at the sleeping infant. "I have not named him yet. It felt wrong to do it alone without his father. When you are ready, the name will come to you." They ate in companionable silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft sounds of the baby sleeping. As the sun set, casting orange light through the windows, Preston showed Emma the bedroom. It was small, with a simple rope bed and a thin mattress, but to Emma it looked like paradise. "You take the bed," Preston insisted. "I will sleep out here by the fire. I have spent enough nights under the stars that a floor will feel luxurious." Emma was too tired to argue. She settled onto the bed with her son, and within moments, both were deep in exhausted sleep. Preston sat by the fire long into the night, thinking about the terrified woman and tiny baby who had suddenly become his responsibility. He had bought this homestead to start a new life, to build something of his own after years of working other men's cattle. He had imagined long days of hard work fixing up the property, clearing land, maybe eventually finding a wife and starting a family. He had never imagined his first day as a landowner would include finding a widow and newborn hiding in his cellar. But as he listened to Emma's soft breathing from the bedroom, he felt a strange sense of rightness. Some things were meant to be, his mother used to say before she passed. Maybe this was one of those things. The next morning, Emma woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she panicked, not recognizing her surroundings, but then memory flooded back. She checked her son, who was awake but peaceful, his dark blue eyes staring up at her. "Good morning," Preston called from the main room. "I hope I did not wake you. Coffee is ready if you want some." Emma rose carefully, her body still sore from childbirth and days of hardship. She joined Preston at the table, accepting the cup of coffee gratefully. "I have been thinking," Preston said carefully, "about your situation. You cannot travel with a newborn, not safely, and you have nowhere to go from what you told me. I would like to offer you and your son sanctuary here, at least until you are strong enough and he is old enough to make the journey to California if that is still your wish." Emma stared at him. "You would let us stay, but people will talk. A widow living with an unmarried man. Then we will tell them you are my cousin, recently widowed, come to help with the homestead until you recover. Black Hawk is a mining town, full of people too busy with their own concerns to pry too deeply into others' business." "I cannot accept charity," Emma said firmly, despite the hope blooming in her chest. "If I stay, I must earn my keep." "Fair enough. You can help with the cooking, the garden I plan to plant, the chickens I hope to buy once I get the coop built. There is plenty of work for 2 people on a homestead, and I could use a partner in this venture, even if only temporarily." Emma extended her hand across the table. "Partners then, Mr. Nash." Preston shook her hand, noticing how small and delicate it felt in his calloused grip. "Partners. And please call me Preston." Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Preston worked from dawn to dusk repairing the homestead. The roof needed patching, the barn required complete reconstruction, and the fences were in disrepair. Emma focused on recovering her strength while caring for her son, who she finally named Samuel, after her father. She also made the interior of the homestead into a proper home. She scrubbed the floors, sewed curtains from an old sheet Preston had in his supplies, and organized their meager possessions into a semblance of domesticity. Preston bought chickens from a farmer on the outskirts of Black Hawk, and Emma tended them carefully, gathering eggs and even getting a few hens to sit on nests for future chicks. One afternoon, in late June, Preston returned from town with a wagon load of supplies and an unexpected passenger. A woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression climbed down from the wagon seat. "Emma, this is Mrs. Dorothy Peters. She runs the general store in town. Mrs. Peters, this is my cousin Emma and her son Samuel." Dorothy Peters looked Emma up and down with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Cousin, is it? Well, cousin or not, a woman who just gave birth needs another woman's advice. I brought some things that might help." She handed Emma a bundle wrapped in brown paper. Inside were soft flannel cloths for diapers, a small knitted blanket, and a tin of salve. "Thank you," Emma said, genuinely touched. "This is very kind." "Not kind, just practical. Baby needs proper supplies." Dorothy's stern expression softened slightly. "You look like you have been through hard times, girl. Preston here told me a bit of your story. Those outlaws who killed your husband, they still running around?" Emma's face paled. "I do not know. I hope they moved on to easier targets." "Well, you are safe enough here. Preston's got a good reputation already in town, even though he just arrived. Folks respect a man willing to work hard and keep his word." Dorothy patted Emma's arm. "You need anything, you come to me at the store, woman to woman." After Dorothy left, Emma turned to Preston. "You told her about Thomas. I had to tell people something. The story of you being my widowed cousin needed some details to be believable. I hope I did not overstep." Emma shook her head. "No, it is fine. It is just strange, having someone know the truth but only part of it." As summer deepened, Emma grew stronger. Samuel thrived, growing plump and healthy on his mother's milk. Emma found herself watching Preston as he worked, noticing things she had not allowed herself to see before. The way his muscles moved under his shirt as he hammered fence posts. The gentle way he spoke to the horses he had bought to work the land. The patience he showed when teaching her how to milk the cow he had purchased from the same farmer who sold them the chickens. She felt guilty for these feelings. Thomas had been dead less than 3 months. But Thomas also felt like a lifetime ago, like a person she had been in a different world. The Emma who had been married to Thomas Jenkins would never have survived alone in the wilderness, would never have delivered her own baby in a dark cellar, would never have found the strength to build a new life from nothing. Preston, for his part, was equally aware of Emma. He noticed when she started smiling more often. He loved hearing her sing softly to Samuel as she rocked him to sleep. He appreciated the way she had made his rough homestead into a real home, with wildflowers in a jar on the table and the smell of fresh bread greeting him when he came in from the fields. But he kept his distance, sleeping by the fire every night, never touching her beyond the occasional accidental brush of hands. She was a widow, still grieving and under his protection. He would not take advantage of her vulnerable position, no matter how much he found himself thinking about her green eyes and the sound of her laugh. One evening in early August, a stranger rode up to the homestead just as Preston was finishing the evening chores. The man was middle-aged, with a badge pinned to his vest that identified him as a U.S. Marshal. "Evening," the marshal said, dismounting. "Name is Marshal Robert Garrett. I am looking for information about some outlaws who have been operating in this territory." Preston felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of outlaws?" "A gang of 4 men. They have been robbing travelers along the Denver route. Recently shot a man and left his pregnant wife to die. I have been tracking them for weeks, but they are slippery. You see anyone matching that description around here?" Emma appeared in the doorway, Samuel in her arms. Marshal Garrett's eyes sharpened when he saw her. "Madam, forgive me for asking, but are you recently widowed?" Emma's arms tightened around Samuel. Preston stepped between her and the marshal. "She is under my protection, Marshal. Her husband was killed by the men you are looking for. She barely survived." The marshal's expression turned sympathetic. "I am sorry for your loss, madam. Would you be willing to describe the men? Any detail could help." Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. There were 4 of them. The leader had a scar running from his left eye down to his jaw. Another was very tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with a black beard. The third was younger, maybe 19 or 20, with red hair and freckles. The fourth was older, with gray in his hair and a limp on his right side. Marshal Garrett wrote everything down in a small notebook. "That matches the description I got from another survivor. These men are dangerous. They have killed at least 6 people that we know of. I want you to know, madam, I am going to catch them. They will face justice for what they did to your husband." "Will that bring Thomas back?" Emma asked quietly. "No, madam, but it might save the next family they come across." After the marshal left, Emma sank into a chair, trembling. Preston knelt beside her. "You are safe here, Emma." "I promise you that." "How can you promise that? Those men are still out there. What if they come back? What if they remember me? Then they will have to go through me first." Preston's voice was firm. "And I am not unarmed or unprepared like your husband was. I have been in range wars, Emma. I know how to protect what is mine." The word mine hung in the air between them. Emma looked up at Preston, and for the first time she let herself really see him. Not as a rescuer or a benefactor, but as a man. A good man who had given her everything and asked for nothing in return. "Preston," she whispered. "Yes, thank you for everything, for saving us, for keeping us safe, for giving us a home." "You are welcome, Emma, though I must confess you and Samuel have given me something too." "What is that?" "A reason to build something worth keeping. This homestead was going to be just a place for me to work and sleep. You two have made it a home." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Then Samuel began to fuss, breaking the spell. Emma stood and took the baby to the bedroom to nurse him, leaving Preston alone with his thoughts. In late August, Dorothy Peters invited Emma and Preston to a church social in Black Hawk. Emma hesitated, not sure she was ready to be around so many people, but Preston encouraged her. "It would be good for you to meet more people in town, to have friends besides me and Dorothy." So they dressed in their best clothes, Preston in a clean shirt and pressed trousers, Emma in the only good dress she had salvaged from her ordeal, and rode into town with Samuel bundled between them. The social was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with food and people milling about talking and laughing. Emma felt nervous as Preston introduced her to various townspeople, all of them accepting the story that she was his widowed cousin without question. A young woman named Sarah Miller, who could not have been more than 19, attached herself to Emma with friendly enthusiasm. "Oh, what a beautiful baby," Sarah cooed over Samuel. "I just love babies. I hope to have a whole houseful someday when I marry. Is he sleeping through the night yet?" Emma found herself relaxing as she talked to Sarah about the mundane details of caring for an infant. It felt normal, ordinary, like she was just another young mother instead of a widow who had given birth in a root cellar. Meanwhile, Preston found himself cornered by several of the town's businessmen who wanted to discuss cattle prices and land values. He handled their questions diplomatically, but his eyes kept drifting to where Emma stood, watching the way the evening sunlight caught in her auburn hair. "You are a lucky man, Nash," one of the men, a banker named Joseph Wright, commented. "Having a woman to help establish your homestead. Too many young men try to do it alone and end up failing." "I am indeed fortunate," Preston agreed. "Your cousin planning to stay long-term, or will she move on once she is recovered?" The question made Preston's chest tighten. He had been trying not to think about that possibility. "I have not pressed her for her plans. She has been through considerable trauma. She needs time to heal." "Well, if she does stay, people might talk. A young, unmarried man and a young widow under one roof. You might want to consider making the arrangement more permanent if you take my meaning." Preston knew exactly what Wright meant. Marriage. The idea should have felt presumptuous, impossible. Instead, it felt right in a way that made his heart race on the ride home with Samuel sleeping peacefully. Emma broke the comfortable silence. "I like Black Hawk. The people are kind. They are good folks for the most part. Mining towns can be rough, but this one has a solid core of decent families. Sarah invited me to a quilting circle next week. I would like to go if you think we can spare the time." "Of course. You should have friends, Emma, a life beyond just work and the homestead." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Preston, what Joseph Wright said to you about people talking, I heard him. Do you think people suspect we are not really cousins?" Preston guided the horses carefully around a rut in the road. "Would it matter if they did? I suppose not. Our consciences are clear. We are not doing anything wrong." "No, we are not, though I will admit Wright's suggestion was not entirely out of line." Emma's heart skipped. "What suggestion was that?" "That we should consider making our arrangement more permanent, through marriage." The word hung in the air between them. Emma's hands tightened on Samuel's blanket. "You mean a marriage of convenience, to stop gossip?" Preston pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple behind him. "I mean a real marriage, Emma. These past months, living with you, watching you with Samuel, seeing the home you have made. You have become dear to me, more dear than I ever expected. I know it is too soon after Thomas. I know you probably still love him. But I want you to know that my feelings for you are real, not just convenience or respectability." Emma felt tears prickling her eyes. "I did love Thomas. He was my husband and Samuel's father, but Preston, I need to be honest with you. What I felt for Thomas was comfortable, familiar. We grew up neighbors. Our marriage was expected by both families. It was good and solid, but it was not passionate. And what do you feel now? Emma took a shaky breath. I feel like I am alive in a way I never was before. I feel like every day working beside you, building something together, is exactly where I am meant to be. And I feel guilty for feeling that way when Thomas has been dead such a short time. Preston reached over and gently took her hand. Emma, Thomas would want you to live, to be happy, to give Samuel a father and yourself a husband. I cannot replace him and I would not try, but I can offer you a future, a real partnership, a family. What if I cannot give you more children? Samuel came early because of the trauma. What if my body cannot carry another child to term? Then we will count ourselves blessed to have Samuel. Children are a gift, Emma, but you are the one I want, with or without more babies. Emma looked down at their joined hands, then at Samuel sleeping peacefully in her lap, then back at Preston's earnest face. Ask me in a month, she said softly. Give me until the end of September. Not because I do not know my answer, but because I want to be sure I am choosing this for the right reasons. Because I want to be your wife, Preston. Not because I need a protector or a provider, but because I want you. Preston brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I will wait as long as you need, Emma. I am not going anywhere. September brought cooler weather and the beginning of the harvest season. Emma worked alongside Preston, preserving vegetables from their garden, smoking meat, preparing for winter. She attended the quilting circle and made friends with the women of Black Hawk. She took Samuel with her everywhere, and the baby charmed everyone he met with his ready smiles and happy disposition. Marshal Garrett returned in mid-September with news. 3 of the 4 outlaws had been caught attempting to rob a stagecoach outside of Denver. They were in custody and would be tried for murder and robbery. The 4th man, the young red-haired one, had died in the shootout when they were captured. I wanted you to know, Mrs. Jenkins, that justice is being served. Those men will hang for what they did to your husband and the others. Emma received the news with mixed feelings. She was glad the men would face justice, but it did not ease her grief or change her circumstances. Thomas was still gone. Samuel would still grow up without his birth father, but Samuel would have Preston. She was sure of that now. On the last day of September, Emma woke before dawn. She fed Samuel and settled him back to sleep, then went out to find Preston already working in the barn. "You are up early," he commented, not looking up from the leather harness he was repairing. "I wanted to talk to you before the day got busy." Preston set down the harness and gave her his full attention. Emma noticed he looked nervous, which made her love him even more. "You asked me a question at the end of August, about marriage." "I did. My answer is yes. I want to marry you, Preston. Not because it is convenient or respectable, but because I have fallen in love with you. With your kindness and your strength and the way you make me laugh. With the way you hold Samuel like he is precious. With the future we can build together." Preston crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you certain? Because once we do this, Emma, I am yours forever. I do not do anything halfway." "I am certain. Are you?" "Because I come with a child who is not yours by blood, with nightmares about outlaws, with memories of another man." "I am certain. Samuel is already mine in my heart. Your nightmares will fade with time and I will help you through them. And your memories of Thomas are part of who you are. I do not expect you to forget him or stop loving what you had. I just want to build something new with you." Emma stood on her toes and kissed him. It was her first kiss since Thomas died, the first time she had felt desire stir in her body in months. Preston responded gently, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "We should probably talk to the preacher," Emma said, her voice shaky. "Probably," Preston agreed. "But first I want to do that again." They kissed again, longer this time, and Emma felt the last chains of guilt and grief fall away. She was allowed to be happy. She was allowed to love again. Life was for the living, and she was very much alive. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Black Hawk, with Dorothy Peters standing up for Emma and Joseph Wright standing up for Preston. Samuel gurgled happily throughout the ceremony, as if he approved of the proceedings. The townspeople threw them a small party after the wedding, with food and dancing and genuine good wishes. Sarah Miller caught the bouquet Emma tossed, blushing furiously when a young miner named Daniel caught her eye. That night, for the first time, Emma and Preston shared the bedroom as husband and wife. Preston was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure Emma felt cherished rather than just desired. Afterwards, as they lay tangled together, Emma traced the scar on Preston's shoulder from an old cattle drive injury. "I love you," she whispered. "I did not think I would ever say those words to another man after Thomas died, but I do. I love you, Preston Nash. I love you too, Emma Nash. My brave, beautiful wife." Winter came early that year to Colorado, with snow falling in November. The homestead was snug and warm, with plenty of food stored and the animals sheltered in the rebuilt barn. Emma and Preston spent the long winter evenings by the fire, Preston carving wooden toys for Samuel while Emma sewed or mended clothes. Samuel took his first steps in January, toddling from Emma to Preston with squeals of delight. Preston caught him and tossed him in the air, making the baby shriek with laughter. "He is going to be tall like his father," Emma observed. "Both his fathers," Preston corrected gently. "Thomas gave him life, but I will give him everything else I have." In March, Emma realized she was pregnant again. She was nervous, remembering how Samuel had come early, but Preston was nothing but supportive. "We will take every precaution," he promised. "No heavy lifting, plenty of rest. And if you need to stay in bed for months to keep this baby safe, then that is what we will do." But this pregnancy was different. Emma was not fleeing for her life or grieving or starving. She was safe and loved and well-fed. She bloomed with health, her skin glowing and her energy boundless. They expanded the homestead that summer. Preston hired 2 men from town to help him build an addition onto the house, adding a proper parlor and 2 more bedrooms. "We are going to need the space," he said with a grin. "Between Samuel and this new baby and hopefully more to come, we will fill this house with children." Emma laughed. "Let me get through this pregnancy first before you start planning a whole brood." But she loved his optimism, his vision of their future together. In October, exactly 1 year after Preston had found her in his root cellar, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Preston Nash, honoring both the father who gave him life in a way and the father who would raise him. Samuel, now walking and babbling constantly, was fascinated by his new brother. He would sit by the cradle and gently pat the baby, saying "Bobby" over and over. Dorothy Peters came to help for the first week after the birth, cooking and cleaning and dispensing practical advice. "You have done well for yourself, Emma," she said one afternoon as they sat together while Emma nursed Thomas. "A year ago you were half dead in a root cellar. Now look at you. A thriving homestead, a good husband, 2 beautiful sons. I know. Sometimes I can hardly believe it. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream, girl. It is what you built through your own strength and courage. Preston gave you a chance, but you took it and made something of it. Be proud of that." As Thomas grew, he looked nothing like Samuel. Where Samuel had auburn hair like Emma and dark eyes like his birth father, Thomas had Preston's dark hair and Emma's green eyes. But they were brothers in every way that mattered, playing together, fighting together, learning together. The homestead prospered. Preston's hard work and careful management paid off. They had a thriving vegetable garden, chickens, pigs, 3 milk cows, and a small herd of cattle. Preston sold beef and milk in town, and Emma sold eggs and butter. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure. In the spring of Emma's 3rd year in Colorado, Marshal Garrett returned one final time. The 3 outlaws who had killed Thomas Jenkins had been tried, convicted, and hanged. The case was closed. "I thought you would want to know, Mrs. Nash," he said respectfully. Justice was done. Emma thanked him, but she felt no triumph, no closure. Thomas had been gone for so long now that the outlaw's fate seemed irrelevant. She had grieved, healed, and moved on. The anger and fear had faded, replaced by the daily joys and struggles of building a life with Preston. That night, as she and Preston lay in bed, she told him about the marshal's visit. "How do you feel?" Preston asked, stroking her hair. "Sad for Thomas, sad for the young man I was who loved him, but grateful too. If Thomas had not died, I never would have found you." "Does that make me a terrible person?" "No, it makes you human. We cannot change the past, Emma. We can only build the best future we can with what we are given. I was given you, and I am so very grateful." They made love slowly, tenderly, and Emma fell asleep feeling completely at peace. Years passed in the rhythm of homestead life. They added a 3rd child, a daughter they named Dorothy after the woman who had been Emma's first friend in Colorado. Then came another son, then another daughter. The house they had expanded was filled with noise and laughter and the constant motion of active children. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved to read and learn. He knew that Preston was not his birth father, but he never called him anything but Pa. Thomas was the wild one, always climbing trees or exploring or getting into mischief. Dorothy was quiet and observant, content to help her mother with cooking and gardening. The younger children, James and little Emma, were still toddlers, but already showing their own distinct personalities. On a warm evening in June, 8 years after Preston had found Emma in the root cellar, they sat together on the porch they had added to the front of the house. The children were playing in the yard, their shouts and laughter carrying on the breeze. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if you had made it to California with Thomas?" Preston asked. Emma considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I think it would have been a good life. Thomas was a good man, but it would not have been this life. And I cannot imagine anything better than this. Even with all the hard work and struggle, especially with the hard work and struggle. We built this together, Preston. Every board in this house, every fence post, every child. It is ours in a way nothing else could ever be." Preston pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Samuel ran past chasing Thomas, both boys covered in dirt. Dorothy sat under a tree with a book, having inherited her stepfather's love of reading. Baby Emma toddled after her brothers, shrieking with delight. James napped on a blanket nearby. "I found you in my root cellar," Preston said softly. "The most terrified, brave woman I had ever seen, with a newborn baby and nothing but hope keeping you alive. Do you know what I thought when I first saw you? That you had made a terrible purchase and gotten much more than you bargained for." Preston laughed. "No, I thought you looked like an angel, a battered, exhausted angel who had fought her way through hell, and I knew in that moment that my life had just changed forever." "Did you know you would fall in love with me?" "No. I thought I would help you get back on your feet and you would move on. I did not expect you to become my whole world." Emma turned to kiss him, deep and sweet. Even after 8 years of marriage and 5 children, he still made her heart race. "I love you, Preston Nash. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for giving me this life." They sat together in the gathering twilight, watching their children play, listening to the sounds of the homestead they had built together. The chickens clucked in their coop. The cows lowed in the barn. The creek that ran through their property burbled peacefully. It had been a long journey from that dark day when Emma had crouched in a root cellar, terrified and alone. She had lost everything and survived. She had given birth alone and lived. She had found love again in the most unexpected place. And Preston, who had only wanted a piece of land to call his own, had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found a family, a purpose, a love that made every day worth living. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Emma thought about the girl she had been, traveling west with Thomas Jenkins. That girl had been young and naive, believing that safety and security were the most important things in life. The woman she had become knew better. Love was what mattered. Family was what mattered. Building something worthwhile with someone you cherished was what mattered. "Preston," she said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me the first night when you let me stay? You said I had given you a reason to build something worth keeping." "I remember. You gave me that too, a reason to keep living when everything seemed hopeless, a reason to believe in second chances, a reason to love again. We saved each other then. Yes, and we have kept on saving each other every day since." Samuel ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Pa, can you tell us a story before bed, please?" Preston smiled at his eldest son. "Of course. Go get your brothers and sisters settled and I will be in shortly." Samuel ran off, shouting orders to his siblings. Preston stood and offered Emma his hand. "Shall we, Mrs. Nash?" "We shall, Mr. Nash." They walked into their home together, hand in hand, ready to end another day and begin another night in the life they had built from courage, hope, and love. Years continued to pass in contentment. The children grew, learning to read and write, to work the land, to value hard work and family. Samuel showed an aptitude for numbers and business that suggested he might someday expand the homestead into something even larger. Thomas was gifted with animals, able to gentle the wildest horse or cow with patience and soft words. Dorothy developed her mother's talent for turning a house into a home, for making beauty out of simple things. James was still young, but already showed signs of Preston's mechanical mind, always taking things apart to see how they worked. Little Emma, the baby, was a force of nature, fearless and determined. The homestead expanded as the children grew. Preston bought more land from a neighbor who was moving back east. They added more cattle, built a larger barn, planted an orchard. Emma sold preserves and pies in town, her goods highly sought after. They were prosperous now, no longer scraping by but comfortable and secure. In their 15th year of marriage, when Samuel was preparing to leave for college in Denver, Emma found herself pregnant again. She was 36 now, older than she had been with the other children, and the pregnancy was harder. But Preston was attentive and loving, taking on extra work so she could rest. In the spring, she gave birth to twin boys, an unexpected blessing that brought chaos and joy to the household in equal measure. They named them Benjamin and Robert and watched with delight as their older siblings doted on them. "We are getting too old for this," Emma said one night, exhausted from nursing 2 hungry babies. "Speak for yourself," Preston teased. "I am in my prime." Emma threw a pillow at him, and they both laughed, then moved carefully so as not to wake the twins sleeping in the cradle beside their bed. Samuel wrote from college, describing his studies in business and law. He sent money when he could from the job he had taken at a Denver firm, insisting that his parents had given him everything, and he wanted to help with his younger siblings' education. Thomas ran the cattle operation now, having learned everything Preston could teach him, and then adding his own innovations. Dorothy had married Daniel Miller, Sarah's younger brother, and lived nearby with her growing family. James helped his father with the endless repairs and improvements that a homestead required. Little Emma, now 12, was learning everything she could from her mother about running a household, and through it all, Emma and Preston's love deepened and matured. They had weathered good years and bad, times of plenty and times of scarcity, healthy children and sick ones. They had buried Preston's father when he came west to live with them in his final years. They had celebrated births and weddings. They had built not just a homestead but a legacy. One evening, when the twins were 5 years old and the household was finally quiet, Emma and Preston walked down to the creek that ran through their property. It was the same creek where Preston had taught Emma to fish all those years ago, where the children had learned to swim, where countless family picnics had been held. "Do you ever wish you had found an empty root cellar that day?" Emma asked. "Never, not once. You and Samuel were the best surprise of my life. I was terrified you would turn us out, or worse, that you would be like those outlaws who killed Thomas. And instead you found a cowboy who fell completely in love with you and your baby." Emma leaned against him. "I found my home. I did not even know I was looking for it, but I found it. We both did." They stood together in the fading light, watching the water flow past, constant and eternal, like their love, like the family they had built, like the legacy they would leave for their children and grandchildren. 25 years after Preston found Emma in his root cellar, they celebrated their anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the homestead. The house had been expanded again to accommodate family gatherings. The land stretched for acres in every direction, prosperous and well-tended. Samuel had become a successful lawyer in Denver but returned home often. He had married a teacher named Margaret, and they had 3 children. Thomas ran the family ranch with his wife Clara, and they had 4 children who were already learning the family business. Dorothy and Daniel had 5 children and another on the way. James had become a farrier and blacksmith, his mechanical skills put to good use, and he and his wife Ruth had 2 children. Emma had shocked everyone by joining a Wild West show for a few years, performing trick riding, before settling down with a cowboy she met on the circuit. They had 1 son so far. Benjamin and Robert were at university, both studying agriculture with plans to start their own ranch together. The family gathered around long tables in the yard, eating and laughing and telling stories. Preston, now 50 with gray in his hair, stood and raised his glass. 25 years ago, I bought a homestead site unseen, hoping to start a new life. I thought that life would be measured in cattle and crops, in acres and profit. Instead, I found something infinitely more valuable in that root cellar. I found Emma. I found Samuel. I found my purpose and my family. Everything good in my life stems from that moment. So I want to raise a toast to my beautiful wife, who turned a terrified moment in a root cellar into a lifetime of love and joy. To Emma, the family chorused. Emma stood, tears in her eyes. And to Preston, who looked at a frightened widow and newborn baby and saw a family instead of a burden. Who loved Samuel as his own from the first moment. Who built this life with me, board by board, child by child, year by year. Everything I have, everything I am, is because you saw me in my darkest moment and chose love instead of fear. To Preston. To Preston, Samuel stood then, his own glass raised. To my parents, to the father who gave me life and the father who raised me, I am blessed to carry both their legacies. And to my mother, the strongest woman I have ever known, who survived the impossible and taught us all what courage really means. The celebration continued late into the night, with music and dancing and children running wild in the twilight. Emma and Preston slipped away from the crowd, walking hand in hand to the spot where the old root cellar had been. It was filled in now, covered over, but they both remembered. "I can still see you standing at the top of those stairs," Emma said softly, "holding that lantern, looking so shocked. I can still see you crouched in the corner protecting Samuel with your whole body. I knew in that moment you would do anything for your child. It is one of the things I loved first about you, your fierce mother's heart. And now look at us. All those children, all those grandchildren. That terrified girl in the cellar never could have imagined this life. But the strong woman she became built it day by day." Emma turned to face Preston, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "I love you. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for 25 more if we are blessed with that much time. I love you too. You are my heart, Emma, my home, my everything." They kissed there in the darkness, with the sounds of their family celebrating drifting across the homestead. Two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way, who had built something beautiful from tragedy and hope. As the years continued to pass, Preston and Emma grew old together. They watched their children raise their own families. They held great-grandchildren, and marveled at how their family had grown from one terrified woman and one newborn baby to a legacy that would last generations. Samuel became a judge, respected throughout Colorado for his fairness and wisdom. He often credited his mother's courage and his father's integrity as the foundations of his character. Thomas expanded the ranch to be one of the largest in the region, but he always insisted on running it with the same values Preston had taught him: hard work, fair dealing, and respect for the land and animals. Dorothy filled her home with the same warmth and love she had grown up with. James's smithy became a gathering place for the community, where people came not just for his excellent work, but for his wise counsel. Young Emma's brief career in the Wild West show became a family legend, and she raised her son to be fearless and kind. Benjamin and Robert's ranch prospered, and they remained as close as twins often are, their families intertwined. On a quiet autumn evening when Preston was 73 and Emma was 70, they sat together on their porch as they had done countless times before. Preston had slowed down in recent years, his body showing the strain of decades of hard work. Emma's hair was silver now, but her green eyes were still as bright as the day he had found her. "I have been thinking," Preston said quietly, "about what comes after." "After what?" "After us. When we are gone. I want you to know, Emma, that these years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. If I died tomorrow, I would die a happy man." Emma took his hand. "No talk of dying, we have years left in us yet. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, I want you to know something. Finding you in that root cellar was not an accident. It was meant to be. We were meant to build this life together, to raise these children, to create this family. It was all meant to be. I believe that too. Sometimes I think Thomas knew somehow that he sent me to you to be loved and cared for. That he wanted Samuel to have the father you have been. Thomas gave you to me. That is how I think of it. He loved you, and so he made sure you would survive, that you would find someone to love you as you deserved." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Their lives had been long and full, marked by love and loss, joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. But through it all, they had each other. Preston lived to be 78, dying peacefully in his sleep with Emma holding his hand. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. His children and grandchildren spoke of his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering love for his family. Emma lived another 5 years after Preston's death, surrounded by her family. She spent her days telling stories to her great-grandchildren, teaching them about the grandfather they had known and the grandfather they had not. She told them about the cowboy who bought a homestead and found a treasure in his root cellar. She told them about building a life from nothing but courage and hope. When Emma died at 75, she was buried beside Preston on the hill overlooking the homestead they had built together. Their graves looked out over land that stretched for miles, all of it owned and worked by their descendants. A legacy of love that had started in a dark root cellar and grown into something greater than either of them could have imagined. Samuel stood at his mother's grave after the funeral, now an old man himself, and spoke to his siblings. "Our mother survived the impossible. She gave birth alone, she walked miles while starving, she faced down her worst fears. And then she chose to live again, to love again, to build something beautiful. That is the legacy she leaves us. Not the land, not the money, but the courage to keep living even when life seems impossible." Thomas nodded. "And our father, both our fathers really, taught us that family is not just blood. It is choice. It is commitment. It is showing up every day and doing the work. Preston chose to love our mother. He chose to be my father. That choice made all the difference." Dorothy wiped her eyes. They loved each other so completely. Even after 50 years of marriage, they still held hands like young lovers. James smiled. "I remember asking Pa once why he never seemed tired of Ma. He said loving her gave him energy, not took it away." Young Emma laughed through her tears. "Ma told me once that marrying Pa was the bravest thing she ever did. More than surviving in the wilderness, more than giving birth alone. Choosing to love again after losing Thomas, that took real courage." Benjamin and Robert stood together, as they always did. "They gave us all an example of what love should be," Benjamin said. "Steady and true and enduring. And they showed us that even the darkest moments can lead to the brightest blessings," Robert added. "If Pa had not found Ma in that root cellar, none of us would exist. Our entire family came from that one moment of grace." The siblings stood together on the hill, looking out over the land their parents had built from nothing. In the distance, their own children and grandchildren played in the yard of the homestead. Life continued, generation after generation, all of it rooted in the love between a cowboy who bought a homestead and a woman hiding in his root cellar with her newborn son. That love story became legend in the family. Every grandchild and great-grandchild knew the story of how great-grandmother Emma survived impossible odds, and how great-grandfather Preston saw a family instead of a burden. They knew about the root cellar, about the first dinner shared in the small homestead, about the proposal by the wagon under the sunset, about the wedding in the church in Black Hawk. They knew, most importantly, that love could bloom even in the darkest circumstances. That courage and kindness could build something lasting. That family was defined not by blood alone, but by the choices people made to care for each other. The homestead remained in the family for generations, passed down through Thomas's line since he had taken over the ranching operation. The root cellar, long filled in, was marked with a small stone monument that read, "Here begins our story. 1876. With courage and love, anything is possible." Every year on the anniversary of the day Preston found Emma, the family gathered for a celebration. They called it homecoming, and it was a time to remember their roots, to honor the courage of their ancestors, and to celebrate the love that had started it all. And so the story of the cowboy who bought a homestead and found a woman hiding in the root cellar with a newborn, became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the possibility of second chances, and the enduring strength of love that chooses to see potential instead of problems, family instead of burden, hope instead of fear. In the end, Preston and Emma's legacy was not measured in land or cattle or money, though they had left plenty of all three. Their legacy was measured in love, in the countless lives they had touched, in the family they had built from the ashes of tragedy. They had taken the worst moment of Emma's life and transformed it into the foundation of something beautiful and enduring. And every time a new baby was born into the family, every time a couple married, every time the family gathered on that hill overlooking the homestead, Preston and Emma's love story lived again. A reminder that even in the wild and dangerous West, even in moments of desperate fear and uncertain futures, love could still find a way. Love could still win. Love could still build something that would last forever.